Alright, so this is the exact blue-black Death Shadow that Josh Utterlayton played at Pro Tour 25th Anniversary. The blue-black Death Shadow deck is relatively new to Legacy. We've seen Death Shadow in Modern, of course, but in Legacy, it wasn't immediately obvious to many people how good this type of strategy would be, but it turns out that there's many beneficial ways of losing life in the format. Street Wraith is just kind of this free cantrip, pay 2 life, draw a card. Simple, easy, and it puts a creature in the graveyard. Snuff Out is another way of losing life. It's a removal spell where you can basically a free terror. Essentially, you just take 4 damage. Thoughtseize, no explanation needed there. One of the big innovations to the deck are the reanimates. Reanimate, of course, being able to bring back one of your creatures from the graveyard. But it can also bring back a creature from the opponent's graveyard. So if you're playing against a reanimator deck, hey, you can suddenly grab one of their Gristlebrand's and put that on to the battlefield. So you'll notice when looking at the mana base, there's actually 3 Watery Graves here, which is kind of weird to see Watery Grave over Underground Sea, but the deck has 4 Death Shadows, and you want to actively be losing that life, and your fetch lands can allow you to do that. The Wastelands, the deck can also play Wasteland, so the deck is basically all cards that can cost 0 or 1 mana. So Force of Will, Snuff Out, Daze, all alternate casting costs. And then Gurmag can also cost 1. So the deck is all cheap stuff, which makes it pretty explosive. You just get a threat out, optimally a Death Shadow, a big creature, and then back it up with some protection, some removal. So yeah, it surprised me how strong this deck is in Legacy. And I didn't play this deck at all before the Pro Tour. Been trying it out a bit in League so far and really liking it. The Dread of Nights, the exact card you want against the Death and Taxes deck. Surgical, one of the best sideboard cards in the format. And some disruption here in terms of him. Liliana is a great grindy card, so yeah, the sideboard is pretty versatile. And the Shadow deck, I'm looking to pilot it today. Make sure to check out the games. The deck can not only win quickly, but it can actually win a long game too in Top Deck Wars. So it's kind of a different version of a Delver style deck, if that is something that you are looking for. Alright, so it looks like our opponent has mulliganed. I think we keep this hand. We've got a Death Shadow. Snuff Out can be pretty useful. I mean, we've only got 1 land, but that's quite okay in Legacy. In fact, this deck can operate off of 1 land pretty easily. There's not many expensive spells. It's like even a Snuff Out or a Force of Will. These cards have alternative mana costs. So your real spells like your Brainstorm and your Death Shadow are actually 1 mana. And it looks like our opponent... Okay, I was about to say maybe they're passing, but no. Looks like a Delver of Secrets. So we could Force a Will this. I'm just going to let it resolve. Normally, you don't want to Force of Will. I mean, so the problem with Force of Willing here is we could just get Daze back. Our opponent could have a Daze, and I don't normally like Force of Willing aggressively unless it's like a combo matchup. Although now we do have a second copy of Force of Will, so that's a little bit awkward. But we have this Snuff Out. So we could actually just go ahead and use it right away. to get the Delver off the battlefield. I kind of like that. So that is going to mean we're going to get a Watery Grave off the Scalding Tarn. And we would love to put our Death Shadow onto the battlefield as quickly as possible. And so we can potentially do it this turn, in fact. And it looks like our opponent is going to go for this Daze. So I think in response I like cycling the Street Wraith because we're going to do it anyways. We can do it right now just to give us a little bit more information. Okay, a second Watery Grave. So we are going to be dazing our opponent's Daze here. And I think we want to make a black mana so as to be able to get the Death Shadow into play this turn. So yeah, we're in a daze, and now we've got Force of Will for whatever the follow-up is that our opponent might have. And our opponent's down to 4 cards now. So Death Shadow is only a 2/2. We're hoping that our opponent doesn't have Lightning Bolt, but if they do have a Bolt, we're going to try to force it. And that's our plan moving forward. We know about one card being that Tropical Island in hand for our opponent. And certainly we could have paid for that Daze, but it would have meant not getting the Shadow onto the battlefield. And I like aggressively getting the Death Shadow down, which is why I like dazing there. Should have probably clarified that. Because if we could pay for the Daze, but then we may run into some trouble. So I like this line, and gonna go ahead and shock. That's gonna allow us to get in for 4. It's a little bit of a dangerous game because we're gonna get hit on the crack back with the Nimble Mongoose, but I think that'll be okay. Now we do have to be a little bit wary about bolts. So we like, I mean, it's a little bit of a race here. We got the Death Shadow down early, and now our opponent's trying to get threshold for this Nimble Mongoose. But if they attack, then we're at a lower life total, so it looks like they're choosing not to attack. And we could Brainstorm end of turn, though we could get dazed if we were to make that play. So here's a Thoughtseize. I like running that out. It's going to put us at a lower life total, but also give us more information for what our opponent's working with, which is really, really valuable. So this could be a Bolt. It's possible. No, it's going to be a Spell Pierce. Interesting. So we have the option to Force of Will. So if we Force of Will back here, I think I like Force of Willing back. That would cause us to lose 3 life at the minimum, but it would make the Death Shadow a 7/7. We're just going to exile the other copy of Force of Will. And we want to put our opponent into a position where they become pretty much forced to chump block with the Death Shadow. Now, this is a disclaimer essentially. I'm no Josh Utter-Leyden with this deck. I don't know, I played it a little bit, but I don't know all of the lines, so I'm constantly hoping I'm not screwing this up. So, okay, we're going to take the Brainstorm here. We can play around the days. The Brainstorm is something we certainly don't want to allow our opponent to have. And I like simply attacking for 7 right here. We would lose to a Lightning Bolt. That is the card we have to dodge, because if our opponent finds a Bolt, they could Bolt us, and then the Mongoose would be a 3/3 because our opponent has 6 cards in the graveyard. So we're hoping for no bolts. If our opponent doesn't find a bolt, then they will be forced to chump block, and that should be a good situation for us. So yeah, it looks like just a passing of the turn. Perfect. We have no way to actually get the Mongoose off the board, so I'm going to start with an attack to force the chump block here. And the nice thing about playing a deck with such low converted mana costs of all your cards is you can play Wasteland and have it be very effective. Excuse me. So, yep, there's the chump block. Here's the Wasteland. We'll just get rid of the Volcanic, and I like passing. We really don't need to Brainstorm here. We've got everything we need to win this game already on the battlefield, and that's the Death Shadow. And I don't think our opponent really has outs now. They had a 1-turn window there, but now all they can do is like play another creature. So like this is just a chump blocker here. We can Brainstorm in response, just so if we find a Daze, then the game's just over, because we can just Daze and we have the mana to pay for a Daze back. Alright, so it looks like our opponent is gonna just go ahead and spend their Daze. So we'll go to 5 here. The deck has both Water Grave and Underground Sea. So I am going to get the Sea now that we're already at a low enough life total for the Death Shadow to be game over if we hit with it, and that is also another combination that just wins us the game on the spot. We know that that one card in hand is the land that our opponent just picked up from that Daze, so we can just Force of Will the Goyf, and then then we have a lethal Death Shadow in play. So in terms of sideboarding against Temur Delver, we don't want Surgicals or Dread of Nights. These are, the Spellbound we may want. In fact, we do want this one, but we don't want Throne of Guests. These are all cards we're not looking at, more combo-oriented, very matchup-specific cards. Liliana the Last Hope on the draw is not really what we want necessarily in this particular matchup. So these are the 5 cards I'm looking at as having potential to be brought in here. The Spell Bomb and the Edict we definitely want, and the hymns are a little bit better on the play. I don't think I'm going to board them in being on the draw. Just sometimes not effective enough. Run into dazes a little bit too easily. Explosives is versatile. It can deal with those annoying threats that our opponent might play, but it's a little bit slow. I think I'm going to not board that one in. So we have 2 cards that I like bringing in. Reanimate is a weird one. It's a weird innovation to the deck. We can get a Tarmogoyf into the graveyard and then reanimate it, so that's pretty cool. I think I'm going to cut one Daze. The Stubborn Denials. I'm gonna shave a Stubborn as well. So a little bit of the counter. Actually, that may have been a mistake, but could have also taken out some Force of Wills, which on second thought might be better. But we're going to run with this for right now. So this is a very clear mulligan. Just too many lands. And I like the 6. Force of Will, by the way, is a card you normally do take out against Delver in these sorts of matchups. The life gain, the life loss is a little bit more relevant for our deck, and we care about very specific cards. So I think it's debatable how many you want in. But I do think I probably should have boarded out some. So we could cycle the Street Wraith. But I think we're playing the Delver either way. I'm going to cycle the Street Wraith. In case we draw something like a Snuff Out, we might want to use it on our opponent's Delver. Did not find that, so we're just going to play out the Watergrave. We're expecting our opponent to start attacking. Okay, so our opponent's just going to daze that. We have no choice. We're going to let that happen. And there's a Ponder, so our opponent may be able to start legitimately pressuring our life total, and a Wasteland, so that's going to set us back a little bit. But we do have this Death Shadow to help get back into the game with. In fact, we could try to put it into play this turn by getting a Watergrave and just running it out. So that play is a bit vulnerable to a bolt, but I think similar to game 1, we do want to be aggressive, trying to cast our Death Shadows. So from that perspective, it does make some sense. to play it here. I'm going to go for it. Now, it is just a 1/1 at the moment, but assuming that our opponent attacks us, it has the potential to grow into a much larger threat. And this play is better against, say our opponent's trying to wasteland us out. Okay, so it looks like our opponent actually kept in some forces. And unfortunately, we have not really drawn very well here in terms of not having counter magic. Wasn't clear to me that our opponent was going to have all of their Force of Wills, but there was one just there. And since we didn't counter that force, our opponent knows or should know that we do not have any counter magic at the moment. So we're looking now for another threat, something like a Gurmag Angler. We also would like removal, so we're kind of hoping that this Ponder is going to be pretty good. I think I'm going to play the Bloodstained Mire and out. Could see an argument for the Wasteland. I could also see an argument to just cast the Ponder. If we just cast the Ponder, we could get dazed, but I'm going to go for it. Could get dazed here. No daze. And a pretty bad top 3 being 2 lands and a Thoughtseize, so we're just going to have to shuffle. Brainstorm. Not exactly what we want. I'm just going to wasteland our opponent for this turn. And then we're going to take another 3. But since we wastelanded our opponent, it stops them from being able to deploy something like a Goyf here. See what we can find with this Brainstorm. Not feeling good about this particular game, but our draws have not been the best. We did find some gas here, though. I think I'm just going to put the lands back now. The Spell Bomb isn't doing a ton at the moment, so I'm just going to play out the Death Shadow. It is a pretty large creature. We don't have a blue card, unfortunately, for this Force of Will. If we had a blue card, our chances would be a lot better. We can still draw one, though. We did shuffle our library there from the Brainstorm, so if we're able to, say, draw a blue card, and then, say, have a Force of Will with protection, so that we can force through this Edict, that could maybe be enough, but our opponent could also just have a Bolt here and play it, and that would just be game. And yep, they do have a Bolt, and we do not have the blue card for the Force. Alright, so as I was talking about, probably a mistake to keep all the forces in. I'm gonna, especially on the play, on the play, we're boarding back all our 4th days and the hymns. So I'm pretty happy to have those cards in the deck. Stubborn Denial is a card we can consider. Reanimate is also pretty good. Yeah, we're just gonna cut the forces here. Being on the play. And like I said, probably should have cut some of them on the draw, not all of them. Maybe had like 2 on the draw. So interesting hand here. We don't have a threat. I'm still going to keep based on the double Thoughtseize. And we have Ponder, so we do have that cantrip. Diabolic Edict can still be a decent removal option for us. So, gonna lead off. I think I'm gonna get an Underground Sea. We should be able to lose enough life if we draw a Death Shadow that we can cast it. So that's why I'm getting the land that doesn't inflict any damage on us. So Force of Will, Bolt, and Tarmogoyf. Not actually, and then 4 lands. Not the best hand, but also not the best Thoughtseize because we don't have any one card that we care that much about. The Goyf is kind of scary. I think I'm going to take the Goyf for now. We have this other Thoughtseize. We can play. So we're going to rip apart our opponent's hand. That is going to happen. And we want to set up a situation so that if our opponent does draw a threat off the top, we can then Diabolic Edict that. So Watery Grave, pretty good draw there. We can play our other Thoughtseize or Ponder. I think both choices are pretty reasonable. I'm going to go with the Ponder. So we found a Mire, a Fatal Push, and a Spell Bomb. Our opponent doesn't have a Nimble Mongoose yet, so the Spell Bomb is not as valuable. I think we just are looking for a threat or more cantrips, so I am going to shuffle into a Street Race, so nothing to do, not the best Ponder. So we do have Wastelands, although our opponent happens to have a land-heavy hand, so the Wastelands are not going to be quite as useful as we would like them to be. Don't see much of an option other than casting this Thoughtseize, seeing what our opponent has drawn. If they have a Brainstorm, certainly we could see them respond to this, but okay, so Force of Will, Bolt, Flusterstorm. 3 lands. The Bolt is going to be annoying if we draw a Delver. It does make us at 3 life less, so it's certainly relevant. Flusterstorm could be good. Force also could be good. Both of those cards could be good. This is actually kind of tough. I am not sure what to take in this situation. I'm going to go with the Flusterstorm. Reason being there is that our opponent can maybe, even though we have a mana-heavy draw, our opponent can make a play like play another spell, then play Flusterstorm, and a Flusterstorm for, say, 3 or 4 with 3 or 4 copies on the stack should be a good counterspell. But yeah, we're really looking for something like a Death Shadow or a Gurmag Angler now. Brainstorm is not bad. I think I'm going to play out the Wasteland. That way we can't get spell pierced. Okay, we did find a Gurmag Angler, which is pretty nice. So I like just trying to get that onto the battlefield right away. We'll get our other Underground Sea. We got one earlier. And then I am going to play around Daze. Just in case, you never know. Our opponent could have drawn a Daze here. So we're going to play around it. And run out the Gurmag Angler. Now, if our opponent found another blue card, they could force a will, but it looks like they did not find one. Not sure if we want a Wasteland here or not, to be honest. Don't think I'm going to. Reason being is our opponent can actually make great use out of their excess lands. Okay, Ponder is going to resolve. And so the Lightning Bolt and the Force of Will, we know about them. And we have to assume now that if our opponent wants it, they're going to have 2 blue cards in hand for a Force. But we're kind of all in almost on this Gurmag Angler. Now that we have a threat in play, there's a decent chance that we can just coast with it. Interesting, so no play from our opponent there. Feels like the safe thing to do is Wasteland away this Volcanic Island. So I'm going to do that. We'll see what our opponent's got here. Alright, so our opponent did actually find a Tarmogoyf. But we have this Diabolic Edict in hand. I think we want to run it out. Our opponent clearly has not yet drawn a Nimble Mongoose. Edict is a way to get rid of a Nimble Mongoose that Snuff Out cannot. But I have a feeling that if our opponent answers the Edict, we will probably get this Snuff Out to resolve. And so our opponent may have that force of will that we are aware of, and so they are going to cash it in. That's interesting. I believe they exiled a Spell Pierce to that. Untapping there might have been the wrong choice, although we drew a Stubborn Denial. So I think we just snuff out. We do know that our opponent has a Bolt, which is why I was saying we could have tried to hard cast the Snuff Out, but I'm just going to go for this line. Go down to 6. We can wasteland. Now we can wasteland the Volcanic. So we're cutting our opponent off of resources. And as far as I'm aware, some lists of Temur Delver play only two Volcanics. I'm not sure if that's, maybe that's wrong. Maybe it's always 3 and 3. But anyways. So, okay, our opponent has a Wasteland, that's fine. So if they're passing, that's great news for us. And there's a Death Shadow, so we can deploy that. Does it make sense to actually play it? I'm just gonna sit on the Stubborn Denial. The creatures our opponent plays aren't really terribly relevant. And that is going to be the conclusion. Sweet, so it looks like we won the die roll here. And interesting. Pretty land heavy hand. 4 lands is not what we're looking for. We do have 2 Delvers and a Daze, which is kind of nice. If we draw a Brainstorm, this hand is actively quite good. We're on the play. I'll try keeping it. We can lead off with the Delver. We can potentially look at our top card, and then if it's a land, we can, like on turn 2, we can use a fetch land to shuffle it away. And Delver is really the best turn 1 play for this deck. And there we see our opponent aggressively trying to stop our Delver with a Force of Will. So I'm going to Daze that. It's a clean 2 for 1. And by the way, the Antiquities War is the card that our opponent has exiled. So it's going to be an interesting matchup, because that's not a card you typically see in Legacy. So Citadel and a Mox, but looks like that's it for this turn. So we'd love to start attacking for 3. Ugh, man. It's pretty unlucky to find that Water Grave sitting on top of our library there. So sometimes that's the gamble you take with this sort of a hand. We have a good start, We're really a brainstorm away. If we draw brainstorm, that's gonna change the whole game for us. Chalice for 1, yep. Can't do anything about it. It's gonna come down. That's gonna forget everything I said about the brainstorm. We're just hoping to flip our Delvers and start crunching in. And we cannot do so because we've hit 2 lands on the on our draws here, which is really, really unfortunate. Can't wasteland either of these lands, of course. So forced to just pass the turn. Does not feel great. Now our opponent's got a number of options available to them. There's a thirst for knowledge. Can't counter it. It's gonna resolve. We'll see what our opponent can come up with. Discards a Lotus Petal. Pretty scary that our opponent's got 5 cards in hand. So we finally found a copy of Snuff Out. That's a weird one because we can actually cast it. I guess we'll draw it. I don't think it's probably going to be very good, but it's better than a lot of our other draws since we don't have too many good draws at this point. And Snuff Out's a card we can cast through the Chalice of the Void. Okay, there's a Karn, so that's actually fine. Karn is not the worst thing we could have seen, and our opponent is going to go for a Construct. Interesting. Well, might as well fetch. Just thin out our deck a little bit. Force of Will, okay. We could actually just hard cast the Snuff Out. Don't think our opponent is going to be playing Daze in their deck. So I think I'm going to do that. I'm just going to cast the Snuff Out. Because we don't really want to be losing life here. And the reason why I say our opponent's unlikely to have Daze, and there it is, there's a Daze. So our opponent does have a Daze. Just because I saw the Darksteel Citadels, it seemed unlikely. But now we know that our opponent does have Daze. And I'm just going to go at our opponent's face here with the attacks. We're really just hoping our opponent doesn't have anything. I doubt that Daze is going to be the tipping point. Yeah, it's really weird that our opponent is playing Daze, I feel. I don't know. I guess it was just a gut. You know, looking at the mana base, we see Seed of Cyanide and Darksteel Citadel. I guess you can play Daze in this deck. We're going to give our opponent a Karn here. We're hoping for no answer to the Insectile Aberrations, and it doesn't appear that our opponent has one. So yeah, we're actually just going to win the game. Based off of our opening hand, we actually didn't need anything additional, as it turns out. Very weird game and weird deck. And now we're in a situation where we're sideboarding without really knowing what we're sideboarding against. Fatal Push and Snuff Out are the 2 cards that I'm looking at. Sideboarding out. We did see Walking Ballista, though. Him to Torax seems like could be a pretty decent option for us. Unfortunately, our deck is pretty weak to Chalice. If our opponent jams a Chalice early on, it's going to be tough for us. Reanimate is also another card we could look at taking out. So these would be the cards I would consider taking out. Edict is another option. It could go either way on. I'm gonna just cut the snuff outs. Still want a bunch of blue cards for our Force of Wills. We now have more information about what our opponent's got in their deck. This hand is a close one because we can't necessarily get the Death Shadow into play right away, which is the problem with the hand. I am going to keep it. We don't know how good the Wastelands are going to be, but there's an Ancient Tomb. Oh, so here's going to be a Chalice. Well, we do have the ability to stop that, and we're going to try to. So that's going to work. That's very good news. And now we're just going to get rid of the Ancient Tomb. So we've dodged the first onslaught of spells, but here looks like some more gas in the tank. Oh, wow. And Soul Artifact on a Darksteel Citadel. That is tech right there. Hard to know how to respond to that. Wasn't expecting it. The Fatal Push looks like complete garbage at the moment. Now, of course, we can play out this Death Shadow. So we're going to go to 14 now. And we drew a Hymn, or a Water Grave, sorry. So I like taking 2 off the grave here. And I think we just want to get the Death Shadow in. Alright, so opponent's going for an Etch Champion. We are certainly going to try to daze here. Could see getting an Underground Sea if we want to preserve our life total a little bit. I think that has value. To get the sea here. And then we can go Hymn. We're staying at 11, which means our opponent can't simply attack us twice with the Citadel. And now we get to take away these last 2 cards, which were an Echoing Truce and a Thirst for Knowledge. So very relevant. So we're just hoping our opponent doesn't rip something great. Seed of Cyanide, that's fine. So maybe our opponent passes now. Maybe they get in. I think we're hoping that our opponent now attacks. So I think we just get rid of a seat. and then play out our creatures. Yeah, wishing this Fatal Push was one of our other removal spells. That was just a clear error. Could have been a Snuff Out or Diabolic Edict, which both would have been significantly better. Diabolic Edict especially would be especially good. We did find a Thoughtseize. Not really doing much here other than flipping our Delver, but flipping the Delver is pretty relevant because now we can start attacking. Okay, so there's a Master of Ethereum. We can potentially answer that with our Fatal Push. So still not getting in. There's a Brainstorm, so we're certainly going to cast that one. Nothing great, really, off this Brainstorm. What we can do is Fatal Push away the Master of Ethereum if we want to. I guess I'll do that. So we've got a force, but no blue card on top of our library. We can always cycle this Street Wraith, but it looks like our opponent's just going to throw in the town. Okay, so we are going to be going first. Looks like for some reason our opponent's playing a 61 card deck. I don't know why that is, but anyways, we're going to keep this. It's a lot of Thoughtseizes, so the hand isn't great, but I do believe it's a keep. Question is, what land do we get here? I think we get Watergrave. Our threat in hand is a Death Shadow, so we're trying to get that out pretty quickly. This is going to bring us all the way down to 15 on turn 1. 2 tropical islands and a handful of blue, red, and white spells. Interesting. I'm going to take the Ponder here. That's the card that kind of allows our opponent to filter through their deck. And because we have other Thoughtseizes, we can follow up with another one. And a cycle of Street Wraith, cycle 2 Street Wraiths actually. So now we've got a bit of a decision. I think I still like Thoughtseizing, though we could Brainstorm reasonably here. But I'm going to Thoughtseize. And now we have Force plus blue card, which is relevant. And we see a Dark Depths, a Swords. Wow, so this is a really weird deck we're playing against. I'm going to take the Swords here, as it's the card that answers our Death Shadow in the cleanest way. Okay, Mox Diamond. So our opponent has a tropical island in hand. And so we could actually force a will this Mox Diamond. which would cut our opponent off the colored mana, and then be able to safely deploy our Death Shadow. Okay. I'm going to bite on this Force of Will play here. Being that we know the contents of our opponent's hand. We know that they don't have a second blue card for their force, so we're committed to playing the Death Shadow just to make sure it gets onto the battlefield. And okay, it looks like our opponent didn't draw anything too great there, so I'm just going to go for a Thoughtseize. That's going to grow the Death Shadow. And okay, there's 2 Stone Forges, so we're not going to take one of those. Clearly, not really worried about much of anything that our opponent has going on, actually. So I'm just going to get in for 7. Yeah, very weird mana base. It's one of those situations where you play against a deck, you don't know exactly what's going on. So part of the reason why I made that Wasteland play is so that we could do this. We can daze here that Stoneforge. Opponent found a Caracas. We can pretty safely go down to 4. Get in. So our opponent can now play that second Stoneforge. And that is going to resolve. So it is a chump blocker. I'm assuming that's what's going to happen here. Though we saw that our opponent's going to concede, probably does see the writing on the wall. And now it's another situation where we don't know exactly how to sideboard because we don't know exactly what we're playing against. So yeah, a few different options here, honestly. Dazes don't seem great, just because our opponent seems to be like a Mox deck. Hymn to Torak could be decent. Edict. I think I like the Edict because we saw Dark Depths. We also saw Punishing Fire, which is an argument for Surgical Extraction. I mean, it's just so hard to know. Honestly, it really is hard to know how to sideboard against what our opponent's got going on. Not sure about these Stubborn Denials. Fatal Push. I mean, we saw Stone Forges, but I don't expect our opponent to have that many creatures in their deck. Punishing Fire can be an issue. I don't know. Not too clear. But we're gonna try this configuration. I think I boarded in 1 Surgical. Drew it. Gonna keep. We have that Delver here to lead things off with. There's a Mox Diamond, so that's gonna pitch a Tundra, and our opponent also has a Grove and a Stoneforge. So yeah, pretty solid start. We have this Snuff Out for removal. We really need it. I think we do really need it. I think I'm just going to snuff out the Stoneforge right away. That way, if our opponent has a Batterskull in hand, they can't just turbo it onto the battlefield. Could surgical away the Mystic, but I'm not going to. Gonna pass. Okay, so we are gonna at least get to surgical the punishing fire, which is why we brought in the surgical for this very situation. And then we're probably going to follow up with a hint at Torak, but let's go ahead and get rid of the punishing fires now. And this is also going to give us a better idea of what our opponents got going on in their deck. Assuming the surgical resolves. Oh, wow. Wow. This is very lucky. Our opponent has 2 copies of surgical in their hand. So that was extremely lucky. Now I am going to look through our opponent's deck to see what's going on in the rest of it. We see a Vendilion Click, we see some swords, Supreme Verdict, Snapcaster. Okay, so it is a Knight of the Reliquary deck. Batterskull is still in the deck. Okay, so yeah, this worked out quite nicely. I will say that. And I guess only 3 copies of Punishing Fire in the entire deck. So that's going to resolve. And now I like just going for the clean him to Torak. I think I'm just going to get the Underground Sea. And now our opponent's operating on empty while we have 3 cards in hand, so it's a great situation to be in. We were very fortunate there. Okay, so here's a Shadow. I think I'm gonna, well, we're for sure playing that, and I'm just gonna hold the Brainstorm for another turn, waste away the Grove, because we do have the second Wasteland, and this allows us to now play a fetch land on the next turn. So yeah, we're gonna let our opponent's Brainstorm happen. And it looks like this could be a piece of interaction, and if it is, we are going to respond to it with a Brainstorm. It's a Path to Exile. Okay, yeah, so for sure we want to Brainstorm in response. And we did Brick there, unfortunately. So we get a little bit of a choice here what we're going to keep. We're going to end up shuffling our library because of this Brainstorm. We can either keep, we're for sure going to get rid of this Verdant Catacombs. I think we get rid of the Edict as well, and just keep the Wastelands. Unfortunately, we don't have any lands we can search for here, so we're just going to have to draw naturally. We drew a copy of Reanimate, so we can actually cast this Reanimate. And I'm going to do that on the Delver. And then we get rid of the Tundra. So we have this Wasteland in reserve. And so still in a pretty good spot. Still in a good spot. But our opponent's pretty far away from actually dying. So we're not going to reveal that Delver of Secrets, of course, on top of our library. Hoping, we don't want our opponent to play another Stoneforge Mystic here. Okay, there's the Savannah. So we got another juicy wasteland target. Assuming that our opponent doesn't have a nice play, we're gonna... Yep, so our opponent is gonna just go ahead and concede here. Okay. Yeah, I think we can keep this on the draw. We don't know what we're up against, so we don't know how good these fatal pushes are actually going to be. But we do have this Delver and the Gurmag, so yeah, sometimes you draw... It's weird, like you draw 2 fatal pushes and there's only 2 in the deck, so looks like our opponent has gone to 6 and is considering their next move here. All right. So it's going to be a tropical island and a Nimble Mongoose. So it looks like Temur Delver. And now we could force this. I'm not going to because we could easily run into a Daze or something like that. It is going to mean that we're going to have to deal with this Nimble Mongoose for more or less the duration of the game, which is the unfortunate part about it. We cannot fatal push it profitably. So I'm going to play this Delver. And okay, so that is going to resolve. But even if it didn't resolve, we have Reanimate, which can... Reanimate can... Not only can reanimate our own creatures, but we can reanimate our opponent's creatures. But it looks like a Dismember is going to be aggressively used on our Delver. So that's going to mean our opponent can get in. Now, what we'd really like to see... I'm going to play the Delta, playing around a potential Daze here. And we don't have another play other than this Reanimate to get back our Delver of Secrets. So we'd love our opponent to play a Goyf or a Delver here. So we can actually use our fatal pushes. And our opponent could suspect we have removal in hand. Although yeah, nothing we can do there about that bolt, unfortunately. So our opponent's down to 2 cards. Okay. Wasteland is an interesting draw. We could potentially try to play Gurmag Angler here. The vulnerability with that play is that we could get dazed, which would be pretty much the nightmare situation here. We could alternatively we could wait a turn and go for the Gurmag next turn. Okay, so it looks like our opponent is fetching in response to our polluted Delta, which suggests possibly a Stifle. Okay. So, yep, nothing we can really do about the stifle there. So I'm just gonna put the Water Grave into play. I don't think wastelanding our opponent's volcanic. I mean, it has some merit, but not sure how much value is really there for that particular play. And now our opponent's gonna be on threshold, which is scary. It's definitely something to be concerned about. Because that Nimble Mongoose is what our opponent is going to try to beat us with. And potentially go all the way with. So we found a Thoughtseize. So that's not a bad draw, because we can see what our opponent's got now, hopefully. So it's a Spell Pierce and a Force of Will. I'm going to take the Force here. And then we could wasteland away the volcanic. Yeah, I guess it's worth it. Just do it now and play the Gurmag. That means that we're keeping our opponent off a card like, say, a True Name Nemesis would be the value of this, if a 3-mana card like that. And Lightning Bolt. Lightning Bolt's a relevant one as well. That does require red mana. Not actually positive that our choice to take the Pierce was correct. I think it was close, certainly. Street Wraith is an interesting draw, not necessarily the draw we wanted. I think we want to just try to race in this spot, because we're attacking first, so we can attack our opponent down to 9. They can then get us down to 7. We can then get them down to 4. So the race currently is in our favor. Interesting that they're fetching right now to get that volcanic. So we're going to take 3, which is fine. Another street race. So these, we're not really getting to use those the way we would like to be able to use them. We're just going to get in. Hope for no threat, although there is a Delver of Secrets that our opponent was able to find. But we have 2 Fatal Pushes, so we're going to go for a Fatal Push, which is probably going to get Spell Pierce, but then the second one is fairly likely to actually resolve. So this is going to get pierced. And we even have the Force now, so we're going to be able to push through for lethal. So that worked out. We were able to let that turn 1 Mongoose resolve and fight through it, eventually win the race. So we're going to be on the draw for this game, which is not optimal. I'm going to take out some of the Force of Wills. I think we want Diabolic Edict. The Spell Bomb is decent against Nimble Mongoose. It's fine. Daze is a card we can consider. Hymn to Torak is okay, not at its best when on the draw. I'm just gonna go with this config. Still have 2 Force of Wills in the deck. And yeah, it's kind of a guessing game as to what threats our opponent might present. But we're certainly not boarding in Dread of Night in the matchup. We're certainly, a lot of these cards are for specific combo matchups. And Temur Delver is actually a pretty similar deck to the blue-black Death Shadow deck, as we are also a Delver deck. So a lot of the same type of stuff, although of course we are playing the Lifelust package, the Death Shadow, so there's plenty of differences to be found as well. And it'll be interesting to see if our opponent keeps in their Force of Wills in this matchup, because sometimes people do keep them in just to be able to have a nice, because it's almost the only answer to a Death Shadow late in the game. No lands here, so we're going to follow suit. Our opponent already mulliganed. We're going to mulligan as well. And then this is pretty easy keep. So, the nice thing about having Force in our deck is that even if we're not able to use these dazes efficiently early on, like maybe we have a great opportunity to daze, which is best case scenario. But if we don't, we can always just pitch it to Force of Will. So that's why a lot of decks like this will still keep in some amount of forces to go along with your dazes. Daze, of course, being one of those cards that is better on the play, but since we're basically only a 1-mana spell deck, this is basically the best possible deck for a Daze. I'm going to bottom the Stubborn Denial. That decision seems fairly straightforward. And the reason why I say that is we don't actually have a 4-power creature in hand. And we have a Daze, which is a similar effect. I think I'm going to cycle the... Well, first let's go ahead and... No, let's go ahead and cycle first. See what we find. Give us some information. Alright, so now we actually do have to think, because our opponent could have a Stifle here, which would be fairly brutal. We're going to try to fetch. We'll see if our opponent stifles. They do not. I'm just going to get an Underground Sea because we don't have a Death Shadow in hand yet. So it looks like no days either. But it could be, there could be something like a lightning bolt, a dismember, a removal spell of some sort. And indeed there is a bolt, and I'm just going to attempt to daze that because this is our only threat. We want to try to keep it in play, so I'm going to daze. And there is a daze back. So now a bit more of a decision. We could really fight for this by forcing, but that would mean we would have to pitch the preordain. So I think I'm going to let that go. Hope to find something nice off the preordain. So it could be our opponent has a counter spell, and they do. So Flusterstorm is an easy way to counter this. So now it's just kind of a top deck war. I mean, we would love a card like a Brainstorm. And our opponent does have a Brainstorm. So that's pretty good for them. We have a removal spell, so as long as our opponent doesn't play like a hexproof creature or a true name, we can kill their threat. Okay, so we drew into this Ponder. I'm going to cast it. And we'll see. Okay, it looks like it's going to resolve. So that's step one. See a Thoughtseize. Gurmag Angler is a card we really want, and we want the reanimate. So yeah, a lot of decent stuff in here. Don't think we want to shuffle. So we can go Thoughtseize plus Angler on our next turn. But we'll see what our opponent's got going on. I feel like that's going to be a good turn for us. Okay, Delver. Yeah, we can live with the Delver. We have the Snuff out. And we do have that reanimate on top of our library still. We might end up just shuffling that away though. So I'm going to start with this Thoughtseize. And hopefully that'll give us a better idea of what our opponent actually has and how to proceed. So, okay, here's a daze. Well, that's interesting. That's interesting that our opponent would actually daze this. Huh. So we can fetch and pay for the daze. We can fetch and pay for the daze if we want to. But our opponent could also just have a land in hand. So, although I don't think it's a land, based on how the game has played out, it could be something like a bolt. I don't know. Alright, this is a weird spot. I'm not actually too sure what to do. I am gonna fetch. Okay. I see what's going on. So it looks like it's a stifle. Based on how our opponent's playing it. Okay, so it is a stifle. We don't have force plus blue cards, so everything gets countered. I am going to snuff out to get rid of the Delver. And we're still okay because we can hopefully get the Gurmag Angler down. Okay, Nimble Mongoose, not a bad draw for our opponent. Luckily, we can operate off of one land pretty efficiently. I'm going to keep that Delver in the graveyard. So yeah, we're gonna play out our Angler. We can reanimate something, reanimate a Delver or a Street Wraith, potentially. That's gonna resolve. We could also brainstorm this turn pretty reasonably. But I like getting in, I think. I think I like getting in. Or alternatively, we can play it a little bit slower. We want to reanimate the Delver, I believe. Alright, well, we're trading 5 damage for like 3. So I think we want to attack this turn. If we get the Street Wraith back, there is some value to that. But it's very costly on our life total. The value to that play is that we would be able to have a 3/4 to block, but I think I'm going to go for reanimate targeting. I guess I'll just target our opponent's Delver. And then pass. See if our opponent can flip something nice. Okay, no. Our opponent actually bricked there, which is a pretty big deal. Fairly big deal there. So we have a choice. We can block and just trade Delver for Delver and take 3 down to 7. We can also brainstorm upkeep. Brainstorming upkeep allows us to flip our Delver. I think I'm just gonna, I don't know, it feels like the conservative play, but I'm just gonna trade it. Not positive on that one. And here's a Tarmogoyf, so we can Force of Will this. It would mean pitching away our Brainstorm, though. Tough decision. I guess I am going to force it. Thoughtseize is not what we wanted, unfortunately. So yeah, just going to pass here. Ugh, weird game. Not sure. Don't think we're favored from here. I'm not sure if I messed up. Honestly, maybe trading the Delver off was a mistake. Because we can't really do much about the Nimble Mongoose. Well, it's a top deck war. I mean, if we find another Gurmag or a Death Shadow would be great. I'll attempt to ponder. It's going to get hit by a Pyroblast. Could have Thoughtseized there, but we don't really want to lose life. Looks like our opponent found a Ponder, but did shuffle with that Ponder. Weird game. Weird game. Wasn't expecting it to come down to this kind of draw-go game. That's a good one. That's a Brainstorm. Brainstorm's a great card in this spot. I think I'm just going to untap here to play around Spell Pierce before most likely firing off the Fatal Push. So I'm going to start with the Fatal Push, because we want to make sure we get rid of this Tarmogoyf. Could also Thoughtseize our opponent. Yeah, I don't know. I'm gonna try Thoughtseizing and then okay. So it's a daze. So we get daze. We're at 4 now. Just wanted to sometimes just having that information that your opponent is empty-handed is fairly valuable. We did find a Death Shadow. That's perfect. So we can play it. It's on the battlefield. Now we can actually attack with the Gurmag Angler. And we're at 4. I'm gonna continue to hold this Brainstorm. And that is going to do it. So we were able to turn it around. Ooh.